What if the world's most secretive commandos just rewrote the map of global power, without anyone officially admitting it? Picture this. North Korea, a country shrouded in mystery, has quietly sent elite special forces to Tehran. Not just any units. These are the same operatives who gained hard-won experience on the Ukrainian front lines, fighting side by side with Russian troops, facing Western-supplied drones, artillery barrages, and the full force of modern electronic warfare. Now, these battle-hardened soldiers have landed in Iran, a move unconfirmed by any government, of course, but that's par for the course in the world of covert operations. Official denials are exactly what you'd expect for missions meant to stay in the shadows. But this is not just another headline about rogue states supporting each other, not just a symbolic gesture or a flag-waving exercise. This is a seismic shift, the practical fusion of military know-how among the world's most sanctioned and scrutinized regimes, North Korea, Iran, and Russia. For decades, the West treated the Ukrainian war, the Middle East standoff, and Asian flashpoints as separate problems, each with its own logic and actors. But the secret deployment of North Korean special forces to Iran signals that those borders are now blurred, if not erased altogether. The same units that learned to counter NATO weapons in Europe are now bringing that expertise to the Middle East, sharing techniques, tactics, and intelligence in real time. Ignore this shift, and you risk missing the emergence of an entirely new global security order, one where conflicts can no longer be contained, and adversaries act as an integrated system rather than isolated threats. What's at stake? The effectiveness of Western alliances, the credibility of deterrence, even the basic balance of global power. If Western strategists keep treating these crises as disconnected, they'll be left flat-footed by an axis that is already operating as a unified front. So, what makes this development fundamentally different from any alliance we've seen before? And why does it matter right now, more than ever? Let's break down exactly how this covert move changes everything. Think the world's flashpoints are isolated? That illusion just shattered. For decades, the map of global conflict was divided into neat compartments. The Russian front and Ukraine, that was Moscow's chessboard, a fight over Europe's fate. The Middle East, a patchwork of proxy wars, where Iran, Israel, and the US all eyed each other across shifting alliances. And East Asia, a powder keg of its own, with North Korea's threats, China's ambitions, and the ever-present shadow of American power. These regions, while volatile, were always treated as separate games. Western policymakers built their strategies on the idea that each crisis could be managed, contained, and resolved in isolation. That assumption, until now, shaped everything from diplomatic playbooks to military postures and even public perception. But the recent deployment of North Korean special forces to Iran marks a seismic shift. It's much more than a headline about two pariah states swapping favors. What we're witnessing is the fusion of previously isolated conflict zones into a single, coordinated system of anti-Western cooperation. North Korea, Iran, and Russia, three countries battered by sanctions and cut off from global finance, are no longer merely sympathetic observers of each other's struggles. They're now actively sharing tactics, technology, and most importantly, battle-hardened experience. Consider what's actually happening. North Korean operatives, who've just come off the front lines in Ukraine's Kursk direction, are now on the ground in Iran. These aren't just theoretical advisors. They're soldiers who've faced modern Western air defenses, survived the drone-saturated battlefields of Ukraine, and adapted under the relentless gaze of advanced Western surveillance. They've been up close and personal with the hardware and tactics that the West relies on, and they've learned, sometimes the hard way, where these systems break, how they can be outmaneuvered, and what vulnerabilities can be exploited. Now they're bringing that hard-won knowledge straight into Iran's military apparatus. Why does this matter? Because the overlap isn't just symbolic. In Ukraine, these North Korean units got hands-on with Western-made air defense systems, the same types now deployed across the Middle East. They've learned, not from textbooks or instructors, but from the chaos of real combat, how US and NATO equipment works under fire. they've operated modern drones at an industrial scale. And perhaps most crucially, they've figured out how to survive and function in an environment where the enemy can see almost everything. A level of battlefield transparency that's now also spreading to the skies and deserts of the Middle East. This is operational knowledge transfer on a scale the West has never faced before. Until now, the playbook presumed adversaries would learn slowly, in isolation, and only from their own experience or limited intelligence leaks. Suddenly, sanctioned states have created a kind of battle lab. What's learned against Western forces in Europe is now being tested and refined against those same forces in the Middle East, and potentially beyond. For Iran, this is a priceless edge. Despite having a seasoned military and a sprawling intelligence network, Iran's direct combat experience against Western systems has always been limited. The North Korean fighters fill that gap, bringing lessons from the front lines of the world's most high-tech, high-intensity conflict directly to the Persian Gulf. And let's be clear, this is not a random act of solidarity. Pyongyang's move is a calculated investment, deepening ties with Iran, a crucial regional player and source of oil, while embedding itself further into an axis that openly opposes Western dominance. For North Korea, operating in Ukraine and now Iran isn't just about helping friends. It's about gaining invaluable combat experience, forging new channels of cooperation, and positioning itself as an indispensable partner in a new global alliance. But here's the risk that should keep Western strategists up at night. If Washington, Brussels, and their allies continue to treat Ukraine, the Middle East, and East Asia as disconnected crises, they risk being systematically outmaneuvered. The adversaries they face are no longer acting alone. They're learning from the same playbook, sharing their hardest-earned lessons, and building a unified front that Western strategy is simply not built to counter. So, how exactly does this North Korean deployment impact Iran and the balance in the region? What can North Korea's shadow warriors do that Iran's forces can't? And why does this terrify Western strategists? To answer that, we have to look past the headlines and focus on what's really happening on the ground. Iran's military is no stranger to conflict. They've been tested in proxy wars, asymmetric battles, and regional power plays. But there's a crucial gap. Iran's forces haven't faced firsthand the full spectrum of modern Western military technology under fire. They know American drones, precision missiles, and electronic warfare platforms theoretically. But theory is not the same as experience, especially when survival depends on it. Enter North Korean Special Forces. These aren't just parade ground commandos or instructors with second-hand stories. Many of them have cut their teeth on the Ukrainian front, a deadly proving ground where Western air defense systems, satellite surveillance, and electronic jamming are daily realities. Here, North Koreans have had to adapt to and exploit the vulnerabilities of Western-made gear. They've learned, not from textbooks, but through the trial and error of real combat, how to blind a satellite, how to spoof a drone swarm, how to keep moving under the glare of total surveillance. This is the kind of knowledge that can't be bottled up and shipped in a manual, or even taught in a training camp. It's earned, paid for in blood and mistakes, and it's precisely what Iran has been missing. For Iran, this partnership is priceless. North Korea brings 4 core competencies to the table, each a direct answer to some of Tehran's biggest military headaches. First, anti-drone warfare. In Ukraine, North Korean units became experts in detecting, jamming, and shooting down enemy drones. They learned how to defend positions against relentless drone surveillance and attack, and how to shield their own operations from eyes in the sky. For Iran, which both uses and faces drones in huge numbers, this hard-won expertise is instantly valuable. Second, surviving in a world of constant enemy surveillance. The Americans, the Israelis, they have the region blanketed with satellites and electronic sniffers. North Koreans have learned how to operate in environments where every movement might be tracked from above. Camouflage, deception, dispersion, unpredictability. These are now second nature. Sharing those lessons with Iranian units means making it much harder for the West to monitor and target Iranian assets. Third, Special operations tactics against a technologically superior enemy. North Korean special forces are trained to leverage surprise, adapt quickly, and use terrain and misdirection to neutralize the tech advantage of their opponents. In Ukraine, these tactics have been refined against NATO standard systems. Now, they're being passed on to Iran, giving Tehran the tools to hit harder, vanish faster, and keep adversaries guessing. But perhaps the most potent weapon North Korea brings is psychological. Their very presence in Iran is a message, one that echoes loudly in Washington, Tel Aviv, and beyond. It says Iran is not isolated, not left to stand alone against Western pressure. There's a system here, a growing axis of sanctioned states that's not just talking about cooperation, but living it on the battlefield. For Israel and the US, this is a nightmare scenario. Suddenly, their tried-and-true intelligence estimates don't add up. The enemy's playbook is changing, and new, unpredictable variables are on the board. Every plan, every operation, now has to account for the possibility that North Korean tactics, honed in Eastern Europe, could pop up in the Middle East. This isn't just about tactics and gadgets. It's about the balance of power, and the psychological edge that comes from seeding uncertainty and doubt in Western command centers. If the US and its allies fail to adapt, they risk ceding not only the tactical initiative, but the sense of control that underpins deterrence itself. The anti-Western axis is learning, evolving, and acting as a single organism. Ignoring that reality is a strategic mistake with enormous consequences. But why is Pyongyang willing to take these risks? What's in it for North Korea? And how does this deepen the threat posed by the broader anti-Western axis? Is this just the beginning of a new world order, one where alliances outlast ideologies? Let's take a step back and look at what's really happening here. North Korea's decision to send special forces to Iran isn't just about sticking it to the West, or making headlines with a flashy show of solidarity. For Pyongyang, it's a calculated move, a vital lifeline. Deepening ties with Russia and Iran is about survival, about finding breathing room in a world where Western sanctions and isolation have already squeezed every last economic and diplomatic opportunity. It's less about ideology, more about necessity. But here's the crucial point. What we're witnessing is the emergence of an axis that's built on shared interests, not on shared dreams or political philosophies. North Korea, Iran, and Russia all have their differences, sometimes deep ones. Yet, they're united by a single overriding objective: weakening Western dominance and breaking through containment. It's not a formal alliance with parades and treaties. It's something far more pragmatic and potentially far more dangerous. We're starting to see real investment in operational cooperation. It's not just token advisors in the background. North Korean specialists bring with them battle-hardened skills, defeating and deploying drones, resisting advanced Western surveillance, mastering special operations against technologically superior foes, and even shaping the psychological battlefield just by their presence. This isn't just a symbolic gesture. It means learning from each other, sharing tactics, and transferring technology in a way that multiplies their collective capabilities. That's a game changer, because the traditional Western playbook, isolating problem states one at a time, starts to look outdated. What happens when these states act as a coordinated system, not scattered troublemakers? Let's imagine three possible futures. Scenario 1. Limited involvement. North Korean operatives serve as consultants, maybe even camouflage trainers or drone warfare advisors, but keep a low profile. The risk here is mostly symbolic, proof that the anti-Western axis is real and growing. Scenario 2. Direct operational participation. North Koreans don't just advise, they actively help plan missions, maybe even join Iranian forces on the ground. Now, the risks escalate. We're talking about a transfer of battlefield experience, real-time coordination, and a new level of sophistication for Iran's military operations. Scenario 3. A permanent, institutionalized military cooperation channel. This could mean joint training, shared intelligence, and a seamless pipeline for weapons and tactics between North Korea, Iran, and Russia. At this point, we're looking at a systemic transformation, a unified front that could stretch Western resources thin and undermine the credibility of deterrence. Each step up this ladder shrinks the West's room to maneuver. And here's what's really at stake. If policymakers underestimate how pragmatic and durable these alliances are, they could lose the power to deter, to influence, even to predict the next crisis. The old model of containment and isolation simply doesn't work when adversaries learn to operate as one system. So, what should Western leaders, and any informed citizen, take away from this realignment as it unfolds? In our next section, we'll break down the practical lessons and the urgent questions now facing global decision-makers. If you're still playing chess with old rules, you're already losing to a team playing a new game. That's the core lesson behind North Korean special forces showing up in Iran. It's not just a headline, it's a wake-up call. What we're witnessing is the birth of a coordinated, pragmatic axis connecting North Korea, Iran, and Russia. These countries, all under heavy sanctions, have stopped waiting to be reintegrated into the Western-led global order. Instead, they're building their own playbook, and if Western governments keep responding to threats as if they're isolated, they're missing the bigger picture. This is systemic conflict, and it demands a systemic strategy. The old habit of handling crises one by one, today Ukraine, tomorrow the Middle East, next week Asia, simply doesn't work anymore. The adversaries themselves are connecting the dots faster than most analysts are willing to admit. For Western alliances, the challenge is no longer just about having the largest military budgets or the most cutting-edge technology. It's about being able to stretch those resources over multiple, interconnected crises, all happening at once. Consider sanctions. Against North Korea, the West has thrown almost every sanction in the book. But what happens when a country has already lost everything it could possibly lose from Western economic pressure? The reality is, sanctions work on players who have something left to lose. For North Korea, maximum pressure is now just background noise. They've built alternative support networks with Iran and Russia, exchanging military expertise, technology, and even battlefield experience. The presence of North Korean operatives in Iran is proof that isolated sanctions are blunt instruments in a world where sanctioned states are learning to survive, and even thrive, by working together. Then there's the issue of alliances. For decades, Western alliances like NATO have been held together by shared values and long histories. But what if the new alliances, like the one forming between North Korea, Iran, and Russia, are actually more resilient, precisely because they're based on pragmatic mutual interests? These countries aren't pretending to have the same ideology or vision for the future. Their cooperation is about survival, shared enemies, and a cold calculation of benefit. History tells us that alliances built on necessity can often outlast those built on ideals, especially under sustained pressure. Intelligence and adaptability have never been more important. The West can't simply outspend or outmuscle its way through this new landscape. It needs to outthink it. That means moving away from tactical, knee-jerk reactions and instead focusing on big-picture strategy, anticipating not just the next move, but the next pattern. The ability to read between the lines, see emerging connections, and quickly adapt to shifting alliances will make the difference between maintaining global influence and being left behind. The risk of clinging to outdated frameworks is real. It means losing deterrence, credibility, and ultimately, the ability to shape the global order. When adversaries are cooperating across continents, acting in ways that blur legal and diplomatic boundaries, and openly defying the mechanisms that once kept them in check, the old playbook just doesn't cut it. So what does all this mean for us? And what's the final, urgent takeaway we can't afford to ignore? Let's dive into that next. This isn't just another news story. This is your early warning call. What we're witnessing with North Korean special forces showing up in Iran isn't some one-off provocation or an isolated headline in the ever-churning cycle of international drama. This is the visible tip of a much deeper shift, one that could redefine the world order as we know it. If you're used to thinking of global conflicts as disconnected, each with its own set of players, motives, and resolutions, it's time to reconsider. The game board has changed. Let's be clear. The coming together of North Korea, Iran, and Russia isn't about shared ideology or cultural affinity or even long-term trust. These are countries with wildly different histories, narratives, and internal politics. What binds them isn't love, but necessity. A shared experience of being sanctioned, isolated, and pressured by the West. Cut off from the usual avenues of global trade, finance, and diplomacy, they have found common cause not because they want to, but because they have to. That's why this axis is proving so durable. It's pragmatic, not idealistic. History shows that alliances grounded in shared interests, especially those forged under pressure, are often far more resilient than those built on lofty ideals. Pragmatic coalitions endure where ideological ones fracture. So what does this mean for us, for anyone watching these developments and trying to make sense of them? The bottom line is this. The old world where conflicts popped up in neat, isolated theaters, Ukraine here, Syria there, the Korean Peninsula over there, is gone. Now these arenas are fusing into a single, complex, interconnected system. Threats, strategies, and resources move across borders and between conflicts with a fluidity that Western policymakers have not fully adapted to. Here's the risk. If we keep reacting to each event as if it's just another separate crisis, we'll keep repeating the same mistakes that doomed great powers in the past, missing the warning signs until it's too late. The West's main vulnerability right now isn't a lack of resources or military power. It's a lack of strategic vision. Focusing on tactical responses, sending aid here, imposing sanctions there, issuing statements of concern when the next surprise happens, just isn't enough. By the time each isolated incident is addressed, the system behind them has already shifted, grown stronger, and moved on to the next challenge. This is why strategic thinking, seeing the system, not just the symptoms, is essential. It's the difference between acting with foresight and always playing catch-up. The real question for the United States, for Israel, for European allies, is whether they can break out of this pattern. Can they recognize the paradigm shift and develop a response that matches the scale and sophistication of this new axis? Or will they keep underestimating the depth of integration and cooperation among these sanctioned states, treating every flare-up as a separate problem instead of part of an evolving unified strategy? What's at stake isn't just the fate of one conflict, or even a single region. It's the very structure of global security, the credibility of Western alliances, and the balance of power for the coming decades. The decisions made now, and the clarity with which we understand this moment, will shape the international order for years to come. Remember, history is littered with great powers who ignored the coming storm until it swept them away. But it's not too late, yet. The situation is evolving by the hour, and every new development is another piece of the bigger picture we're building together. So stay alert, stay informed, and most importantly, start seeing the system behind the stories. If you found this analysis useful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join our Telegram for deeper dives and real-time updates. The world is changing fast. Make sure you're not the last to realize how.